Stephen, welcome.
Thank
It's
you.
good to have you here. I looked on your website recently because I thought I have to try and catch up. I know we do go back a bit, but I thought I have to try and catch up and see, what is Stephen saying about himself just now. And one of the kind of recurring themes was that you're a change management consultant. What's that?
Well, it's a bit of a misnomer, really, because I don't think any of us can truly manage change. But it's how people, generally speaking, describe the process of adapting to the world that's changing around them. So their businesses, their organisations have to adapt and change to meet the demands of the current situation. And for me, it's a bit like learning to surf the wave. The wave is the change. And it's about understanding how the wave works, how the environment works, and how best to stay on your board to get to the beach without being trashed by the wave.
So as a consultant kind of working in that field, what are you bringing to that particular mix?
Well, it's all about people. The top and the bottom of it is that organisations are comprised of people. They're social beings, social entities. And one can move the furniture around, and sometimes we need to do that. We need to change the business systems in line with the new business model. But in the final analysis, it's the people who've got to do the work, who've got to deliver the outcomes. And for me, it's about getting that balance right between focusing on leadership and followership. How does this community respond to the challenges that are facing it? And my job, as I see it, is to help people to ride that wave of change and to get onto the beach without getting trashed.
So what's the advantage? I mean, what's going through my mind just now is I could possibly do that myself. But what's the advantage of bringing somebody in? There's always a cynicism, let's bring in a consultant.
Absolutely, and you can become too dependent on external agencies, and I've seen that happen to the detriment of both the agency and the client. It's useful to have an outsider's perspective. All of us, give ourselves the gift to see ourselves as others see us, and that's largely what I do. Is I help people to see themselves differently from the outside, so that they can make better choices as to what they do with their businesses, with their organisations. And and a good Israeli client friend of mine said, Stephen, 40 days. Just remember the 40 days. This being Palestine, I went with it, and he said, after 40 days, the consultant's part of the problem, and you have to do the honourable thing and leave, or find somebody else to take over, or renegotiate the terms of your engagement, because you're now part of the problem.
So that's a handy hint for anyone using consultants once you get past the 40-day
mark.
Yeah,
just chalk it up, the 40-day mark.
You see all these calendars being mapped on. You obviously really kind of passionately believe in all of this stuff.
I certainly do.
What kind of experience has brought you to the point where you are just now, and what have you done in the past that kind of, if you like, qualifies you as a change management consultant?
Well, very, very early on in my career, I worked with a company of free newspapers, and these two very dynamic entrepreneurs were able to start a free newspaper once every 6 months, which was unheard of in their industry at the time. And what I saw in Bill and Jerry was a passionate partnership who truly believed in the product, truly believed in their people, and recognised that it was their people that were going to make their business model work. And I learned just so much from watching these two very interesting characters set up business after business with great success. Then has to be said that they were bought out by an organisation that was run by accountants, and the magic went, because it suddenly became just about the numbers. And whereas I think we tend to think of these things as rather binary, either or, and it's a balance of the two. We've got to get the people right to get the numbers right. If you focus just on the numbers, you'll forget the people. If you just focus on the people, you'll forget the numbers. So it's about getting that balance right.
Yeah, I hope we haven't lost our accountancy audience as a result.
Well, no, I mean, I have an accountant, and I'm still in business today because I have an accountant. We need people who look after the money. but it's only part of the equation.
Right. What other experiences have kind of shaped where you are just now? Because I know you've done some work in Lancaster University, among other places, and one or two big corporate clients as well.
Yeah. Well, over the years, I think, you know, first of all, teaching at Lancaster postgraduate, post-experienced students. And I have to say, you know, most of these people coming to an MSc in their mid-30s, typically, through to their mid-40s, change of direction in career. And, you know, these people wouldn't let me get away with anything. They had managed big projects, done big things. And I learned an awful lot from them about how the theory works in practice. And I was, you know, mindful that theory has a place in life, but it isn't the doing. But we do need to understand the theory in order to make the doing work. Also, I've learned a lot from working in large and small organisations and looking at the way individuals take on these ideas and make them work in practice. You know, thinking about a recent automotive client, you know, the problem was that they needed to cut costs. The question was, how can we get our Swedish engineers to talk to our German engineers? How can we get the best of both of these cultural mixes working together? And that was very instructive in terms of people understanding and respecting difference and variety.
So it's safe to say you probably learn as much from each assignment.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely I do. And I'm learning all the time. And I would say that, you know, the day when I say, oh, well, I know all about this, or I've learned all there is to know, is the day I should probably pack up and take up gardening or something.
So moving on, I mean, that's given us a little bit of background, bit of a feel. But moving on to this whole kind of issue of people and performance, it's trotted out on a regular basis that people are every organisation's biggest asset. Now, I'm not contradicting that for a second, but is that the case?
Well, they are an asset, for certain. And, you know, take all the people out of a business and what are you left with? I mean, nothing but the machinery and the office space. So it is the people who get the job done. They need resourcing with the right tools, equipment, business model, whatever, to do the job. And we forget that it is those individuals. And the one thing that you have to recognise about implementing any kind of change is that it is about the individual. And very often we try and treat people en masse, you know, as a sort of a blanket lot. And it is an individual process, so everybody has to be worked with in order to facilitate the chain of change. And that starts at the very top. If the people at the top of the organisation are not clear about where they want to go, why they want to go there, and are the living embodiment of the changes they wish to see other people implement, then it's a lost cause, basically. And their message has to be transmitted across the organisation. Similarly, you know, the people on the front line need to be able to get a message back up the chain or across the organisation that maybe things need to be done in a slightly different way. So we need to listen a lot to what's going on in our organisations and outside them as well.
I mean, it sounds to me like, you know, communication's obviously core to that happening, but, you know, I've heard lots of people saying, I communicate with them, but it doesn't seem to work. In your experience, what's behind that?
Well, you know, we can come at communication from the point of view, are we focused on the problem or are we focused on the solution? Are we focused on, you know, asking questions about how other people see the solution? Or are we in tell mode? And I think very often, if we listen to what's going on, we tend to focus on the problem and telling them how it should be sorted or whatever. We get on an awful lot better if we ask questions which enable the people concerned to resolve the question, focusing on a solution. And that has a positive impact on the way, but actually this goes back in part to the way our brains work. You know, if we accentuate the positive, we look forward, we talk about the solution, and we enable other people through our questioning to solve the problem for themselves, then we get an awful lot further. I tend to find that the people who communicate a lot focus on the problem and they tell other people what to do, and of course you get absolutely nowhere with that. Just get resistance and a war.
Right. Is there not, though, a bit of a danger in there, in the sense that, you know, people think my job as a leader here is to get us, to move us forward, and therefore people will be looking to me to make the decisions and to have the solutions. The minute I open myself up to looking for solutions from other people, that's almost like a sign of weakness, an admission of failure?
Well, I would say quite the opposite, actually. I think that the savvy leader knows and understands very clearly where they want to end up and why they want to get there. But they also recognise that it's their people that are going to get the body of the kirk, as it were, everybody to that particular point. And you have to, if you like, co-opt their goodwill, their trust in you, and allow them the possibility of contributing to that success. You will only get there. I mean, there's a chain. You know, first of all, we have understanding. If we don't have understanding, if the people don't understand why the leader wants to get there, and if the leader doesn't understand what the people are making of that situation, then we've got problems. Out of understanding comes mutual respect, and without mutual respect both ways, if the leader does not respect their people and the people do not respect the leader, you've got no chance of moving very far forward. And that respect underpins trust. And the core component of any kind of leadership dynamic is trust. And it's out of that trust that you get the collaboration. So I trust my people to get it right because they know what I want, they know where I want to get to, they know I will listen, they know I will change my mind if it gets us all to the point that we want to go to. And I've seen that happen time and time again with successful leaders in large and small organisations. And I've seen the opposite, where the leader tries to impose out of some fear or ego-driven need, and it just becomes a bear garden, and we wonder why we don't get terribly far.
So, I mean, I can see the logic behind all of that, but if I've had a particular approach to management, to leadership over a period of time, which has been, you know, it's down to me to know the answers to the questions, what would your advice be to me in terms of to encourage me to let go?
Right. Well, you know, it's a truism that our experience has been precisely what we needed to do to get us to where we are today. The big question is that way of doing things going to work in the future? Now, if you take an owner-manager business, it starts off with the owner-manager pretty much doing everything in the business, and then they bring a few people in, and it's about partnership. So the owner-manager is seen as part of the doing. So there's this balance between the people aspect and the management aspect. Once you get you know, to a size of 20, 30 people in an organisation or a unit, you have to have somebody who sits back and thinks about the strategy, the direction, and leaves most of the doing to other people. So it's about letting go. I'll tell you a story of a client I had some years ago. In fact, you'll notice their products on most supermarket shelves nowadays, the Ring Group. And Danny Rivlin, who family owned that business, recognised very early on when his father asked him to take the business over, Danny recognised that he was not a natural business manager. What he was very, very good at was sales negotiation and doing some really interesting deals. So he, against his father's best advice and wishes, bought in, paid over the odds for a general manager who managed that business from the inside, and Danny did what he was best at and focused on the outside. So it's, you know, my advice would be recognise what you're good at, do what you're good at in the business, and those things that you're not good at in the business, bring people in to support you in getting to where you want to go.
Okay. Just to encourage the audience, remember, questions at any time, please feel free to fire them in. Just want to pick up on something else that I noticed, where you were talking about a balanced scorecard.
Yes.
I'm completely bamboozled by that. How does that? The only scorecard I'm familiar with is on the golf course.
Well, you know what most businesses are interested in is the business profitable? What does the balance sheet look like? And whereas those things are important, they tend to be the outcome of various events. They tend to be effects, not causes. So a balanced scorecard looks at elements of the enterprise, the organization, which contribute towards the financial outcomes. So on the one hand, you would have a series of measures around people and research and development, the intellectual, the human capital of the business. Mm-hmm. And you would look at causes. So how many new ideas have we had this month or this quarter? How many of those ideas have come to fruition? Yeah. We would look at the marketplace, and as anybody running a sales operation knows, it's not the sales line that actually matters. It's how many prospects you've been calling that month that will yield business in 2 or 3 quarters time, or whatever it happens to be. So you have measures looking at the marketplace, you have measures looking at the people and the human capital, and you have measures that look at the operation, so the manufacturing process or whatever. And my recommendation would be that you have 16 overall, so 4 key measures for each element, so that you're not overburdened with information. Because what happens in a lot of organizations is that we collect vast reams of data. Mm-hmm. To what end? Yeah. And you imagine driving a car. How much information do you need to drive it effectively? Actually, not that much. But as anybody who's into motor cars can tell you, there's all sorts of instrumentation you could put in there, mm-hmm. should you wish to do so. But most of us would be totally bamboozled by it. So the clever bit is measuring the stuff that's actually going to help you then? Absolutely, and measuring causes rather than effects. Right. Effects being outcomes. Right. Outcomes. Well, for instance, profitability. Yeah. We've made so much profit this month. How? Why? What was it that we did, or what was it that if we didn't do it, we wouldn't get that outcome? That's the key. That's an interesting point, because I suppose instinctively a lot of people look for the causes when things go wrong, but you seem to be suggesting that you should look for the causes of things going right as well. Absolutely, right. Absolutely. And this is about being aware. I don't know what it is about our Anglo-Saxon culture in particular. It's not the same elsewhere, I've found. Once it's done and dusted, it's done and dusted. It's on to the next. And we tend to be pretty slow on the uptake, lessons learned, looking at how things worked well, and going back to that thing, are we focused on the solution? Are we asking the right questions? The positive stroke that gives us, the benefit psychologically of lifting us. Let's celebrate our successes. You'll find that happy relationship, whatever it happens to be, if there's a lot of positive stroking, compliments, acknowledgements of what you appreciate about that person or that relationship, the better the relationship's going to be. If you're continually slagging people off and pointing out their shortcomings, well, they're going to slowly collapse in on themselves and not give you the best, because they don't want another row, do they? Right, I can see that. We've got a question from David here, Hello,
which
David.
is specifically relating to the Highlands. So it's interesting from that perspective in particular. Is there a fear in the Highlands that if you spend time and effort developing people, particularly young people, that there's a risk that they take that development off when they move south?
Goodness me, I don't think that's particularly uncommon elsewhere. I think that there is always this case that, well, do we put money and time and effort into training anybody because that might work. But you know, for me, this is an overall ethos. I would see that everything that we do, generally speaking, when we're asking that kind of question, we're thinking about, you know, time spent sending people off on courses. And I have to say that the vast majority of time and money that's spent on courses is actually wasted. Total waste of time, effort and money because of the way we use that kind of training intervention. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that in a moment. So it's about focusing on that person to get the best performance from them in the situation that they find themselves in. And, you know, if you make it worth their while to stay, they will stay. For me, it's a very simple thing.
So you said make it worth their while to stay there. Is that just about money? I suspect not.
Goodness me, no. I think, you know, when people start talking about money, it's the lowest common denominator. And you know that there's something that's not quite right elsewhere. You know, as long as people have a living wage and are not, you know, economically pressed themselves, basically the things that motivate us are very simple. They are a little bit of autonomy. So has this person got a degree of freedom to make their own decisions, to decide how a particular piece of work should be done, bring their own creativity to work? It's the crack, you know, it's the 3, 4, 5 other people that we work with that give us the joy in coming to work. And I think most of us have worked in organisations where, you know, actually it's pretty miserable, but you know, actually we're a great team together, it's us against the rest, and the adversity brings us together. So it's that sense of friendship and companionship that we're looking for. Next off is, you know, is what we're doing with our life, our work, does it make a difference? Can we see at the end of the day something that we can say, yeah, I did that, I made a difference, and I can be proud of that. And those are the basic motivating factors that actually will enable people to stay. And the final thing is, are they appreciated by the boss, the people who they work to and for?
So the message there is we shouldn't be overly concerned about the idea that it's just about money that drags people south.
No, absolutely no. It's about opportunity to expand and to grow. And my belief is that can happen anywhere, and especially with. Well, look at us here. You know, we're in a room here, you're in a room out somewhere else, but we're all in a big room together in a way, aren't we? You know, we have means of communicating and working with the wider world now, and there's every opportunity for people to stay in the Highlands, I would argue.
Picking up on the first part of your answer there to David's question, you alienated accountants and brought that back.
Yeah.
And then you went for training providers next time. So now's your opportunity to bring them back, because a lot of them will be running now. You said training's a waste of money, which is a bold statement. Yes,
absolutely it is, in the way that it's done.
Okay, so what's wrong with the way it's done?
What's wrong with the way it's done? Well, look. You know, first of all, we have to look at the whole person. And what we tend to do with training is that we focus on skills and knowledge. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have skill and knowledge imparted, and we shouldn't learn skill and knowledge. I'm not saying that at all. But if you look primarily at skill and knowledge without also taking into account attitudes and habits. So attitudes and habits are the things that we bring to bear in applying the skill and the knowledge. Now, typically what happens with training is that first of all, it comes out of the review or something that you've not done terribly well. So as you're not an okay person, we send you away on some training. You go away on your training course, a one-day epic on whatever it happens to be, or a week epic on whatever it happens to be, which isn't necessarily tailored to what you need to learn, it's general. And then you come back into the workplace and people say, well, you know, I hope you enjoyed your holiday, welcome to the real world, let's crack on. And what you need is coaching and helping you to form habits and change attitudes so that you can actually use the skill and knowledge. And it takes about 3 months, 2 months if you're going well, but about 3 months of concerted effort, at least an hour and a half a day, practicing the skill or the knowledge that you learnt on that course. So you have to put a lot of effort into making certain that the training is targeted, making certain that it's right for the person and the situation and their business, and then making certain that they can use it over several months. And if you don't do that, we end up with, remembering about 10%, which is typically what we do after 30 days. And that might be the wrong 10%.
Right, so it's all about that, getting it right.
Absolutely.
By planning it and then reinforcing it when it comes back.
Yeah.
Are there any, I mean, you've kind of touched on it, but are there any kind of specific tips or hints that you would give to people who, are perhaps in the situation where they've had some staff coming back from being away on courses? What would your suggestion be if you've not been in the habit of doing that kind of coaching role?
But first of all, so why did you send them? What do you want them to achieve? What is it that you want out of that for your organisation? And you need to get alongside them and make certain that they are applying that skill and that knowledge, shifting attitudes, getting new habits in place to make use of the skill and the knowledge and target it. And you have to be fairly consistent with that over 2 to 3 months. And I would say that a lot of a line manager's role is about coaching, it's about training, and it's just what we do, because after all, our people are there to do the job. Our job is to make it possible for them to do that training. Right.
Okay. Well, let's move back to another audience question. We've got a good one from Linda here.
Hello, Linda.
This will possibly make you smile a little bit, but how can we motivate team members who don't or won't buy into the company goals? There surely can't be people out there who don't buy into the company goals.
Oh, there are.
Surely not.
Yeah. Well, pithy answer to that. If you can't change the people, change the people. Typically, if you're shifting quite radically what the organisation does and how it does it, implementing some kind of change initiative, about 20% of your population typically will probably move on because they're not suited to the new ethos. And I think we have to recognise that sometimes we have to let people go. Having said that, if people leave, they also leave with a lot of skill, knowledge and experience that pertains to your organisation. So you don't necessarily want them to go walking out of the door. Although that might be beneficial, cost-benefit analysis here, is the disruption they cause worth the candle? So you need to understand what it is about the new ethos that they can't buy into, and this for me is really important. It's my sense of self. If my sense of self is not comfortable, if I'm not comfortable in my skin in the organisation, doing the things that I'm now being asked to do, am I possibly saying, look guys, actually we've got it wrong here and we should be doing it the way that I'm suggesting, and although it looks as though I'm going against the flow, actually there's something worth listening to here. Because sometimes the naysayers are the new wave, if you like, of the change that will come in several iterations down the line when the circle comes round again. And sometimes it's just totally a mismatch, a misfit, in which case, people have to be helped to move on and find a better home, and they will be grateful.
You talked there about trying to get an understanding of why they're not buying in. Again, looking at it from a practical point of view, any tips, suggestions there?
About how I would...
If someone's not buying in, okay, you've said some people won't buy in and there's not much you can do about it, but if we assume that some of the people who aren't buying in want to stay, but they just don't feel comfortable, how do you get to the bottom of that fact that they won't buy into the goals?
Well, my mind's drawn back to some work I did with BAE Systems some years ago now, but it's classic really. All of a sudden on engineering project teams we had accountants, and these engineers used to be they would just continue engineering the problem out and spending X amount of money and passing it on to the MOD, and that was all very well. And then all of a sudden government turned around and said, actually, we want an aeroplane for a price. So the engineers had to be controlled and constrained. And the key there was, and there were some engineers who just couldn't live with that. And they left because the new ethos just didn't fit. But the key to the door for most of them was, look, if you want to continue building some of the best aeroplanes in the world, we've got to make certain that the business is profitable, that we have a flow of money coming in for you to do the engineering. And how can you do what you're doing smarter within the constraints? So it was about reframing their terms of reference for themselves and hooking that reframing into something that really motivated them. So talking to them about cost, you're out to lunch. Talking to them about good engineering, that's the way in.
Right. So it's finding those.
It's finding it. Yeah, absolutely. So it's reframing, refocusing, hooking into what's really important to that individual. And if that doesn't exist, we have to accept that maybe they're better off somewhere else.
We'll move on.
Yeah.
Okay. Got another good question here from Donald this time.
Hello, Donald.
How should one handle dysfunctional line managers?
Oh, define dysfunctional. That covers a multitude of sins, doesn't it? And dysfunctional who in whose eyes? Looking from the top down, it might be a very different sort of dysfunction from the bottom up. If we mean by dysfunctional, people who aren't able to perform, to do the job that's being asked of them. My view is that first of all, seek to understand. So focusing on the solution, not the problem, focus on the solution, and ask questions about how they see the world, why they're doing the things they're doing in the way that they're doing them, and just pointing out how that's at odds with what's expected of them. And frankly, it's into performance review. If you can't reach agreement with them about how something should be done, then it's into performance review and disciplinary action, and of course notate it all the way through and do the thing properly. Respecting both the individual concerned and the business needs as well.
You made an interesting point there at the beginning there in relation to what do we mean by a dysfunctional manager? Something I just wanted to explore a wee bit. You're saying looking from below at the line manager and looking up from up. You could get very different perspectives.
Oh,
there.
You certainly do.
Is one more important than the other, or how do you balance those two?
Well, this is about power in power relationships in the organisation, and one person's dysfunctional manager is somebody else's creative. So you have to follow the power, and sometimes the power's not necessarily got the right answer. It's a political question, and like all political questions, it's resolved through negotiation on the basis of understanding. But again, I go back to the point of what's the solution that people want, what's the outcome they want, and ask questions about people's points of view on that and how we can move forward, and find some area of commonality.
Right.
What is it that we can all agree on? And what you tend to find is that we can probably agree on more than we can disagree on. And once we've isolated what we can disagree on, we can then start talking about, so why do we disagree about that?
Right.
And what can we do about it? Not the history, not where it came from, not what damage it's doing, but okay, so what is it about this that we can move forward together? And if all sides go into this with good intent, and it's back to that mutual respect. If you don't have mutual respect, you get you get quarrelling basically.
Right.
And it's about managing the thing forward out of mutual respect.
Okay. I think, again, moving on, because I am conscious of time, but having said that I'm conscious of time, there's about 10 minutes left, so if people do have last minute questions they want to pop in, I've got a couple here that we've not covered yet. And Ian has asked,
hello Ian,
are poor communicators a lost cause, or should we just give up on them?
Well, again, it depends who, what do we mean by poor communicator? I mean, all of these things are relative. I have an accountant friend who is actually technically very, very good. He actually runs his own business. But he doesn't want to do anything that is about training, for example. So, stick to your knitting, stick to what you're good at. If you're in a role that demands a lot of communicating and you're not a good communicator, maybe it's about learning some skills. Maybe it's about going and doing something else. And we also have this thing about introverts and extroverts. Sometimes we have a picture in our minds about what a great leader looks like, and it's an extrovert, isn't it? Well, it turns out that 50% or thereabouts of the population is introverted, self-referencing. And many great leaders are actually introverted. They're much more considered, much less in your face. So it's about understanding what the normative values are, who says it's dysfunctional, and why do they say so. Okay. Moving on to a question from Lucas. Hello, Lucas.
Ethos, mission, vision. How do you develop them in the first place?
Well, when we've got the answer to that and put it in a bottle, we'll both make an awful lot of money. I mean, these are attributes, they're deep traits within, if you like, the soul of the person. It's not something you can train. Dare I say it, it's not even something you can develop. But it's something that grows over time. So this is, for me, a little bit like leadership. You have to understand what these things look like and mean to you, and to cultivate them rather like you'd cultivate a garden. So creating the right conditions in which the ethos can grow. What is the ethos? What are the values? What are the beliefs? Understanding those, understanding what they mean in practice, so that they're not just words. What's the vision? Why is this picture of the future important? Why should anybody buy into it? And then bottoming out, so how are we going to get there? What's the grand plan to get us to achieve that, using the ethos? Now, all of those things are cultural, and they grow out of experience. Some people can do that, and some people frankly can't. But I think we can all, over time, develop those abilities. Largely, I think it has to be said, by experiencing and watching how other people do it well, or not so well. I'm
going to move on, because Lucas has actually asked another question. I can follow on to that, which maybe sheds a little bit of light on that question, because we are starting a second company and would like to get it right from the beginning. Have you any tips? Now, your previous answer to me suggests that actually you can't start a company and come up with an ethos and a mission and a bit, but I'm sure that's not what you're actually saying.
No, it isn't. And so you have to ask the question, what's the purpose of this business? How will it do business? What does it look like? The way of doing business look like from the inside and from the outside? What are the values that this business will espouse? And how will it go about making its mark in the world and pursuing its vision? And all of these things have to be communicated, so they have to emanate from somewhere. So this will be the people setting up the business. And they have to be very clear about what it is they want to achieve with that, and why so. And then be able to communicate that and inspire other people to follow it.
Another question from David, just moving on because, as I say, conscious of time. What's the best piece of people or performance management advice you've ever been given, and why? That's putting you on the spot.
No, not at all. It's listening.
Right.
Without a shadow of a doubt, you know, one mouth, two ears, use them in that proportion. Listen, watch, observe.
Right.
Take stock, understand the other person, the other people, and see it for what it is.
Right.
And be considered, rather than leaping in with your particular point of view. It's the old Stephen Covey thing, seek to understand before seeking to be understood, isn't it?
Well, yeah, absolutely.
And listening is the key skill there. Still learning.
This is really nice because Michelle's come in with a kind of another punch, this time asking what's the most valuable mistake you've learned from, which is a nice wee counter to do this.
Oh yes. Now, which one would you like me to talk about? I've made quite a few in my career, and it has to be said that I think most of us value our mistakes because, you know, that's where we learn the real lessons very often. And I think that the biggest lesson I've learned over time is that, you know, do what's right for your heart. You know, listen to your heart, listen to your soul, if you like. Don't do something that you don't feel comfortable in your skin doing. And the other thing is, don't work with people who you don't feel comfortable in your skin with either. I've always found that I've done better work with people who I feel comfortable with, and it's back to this understanding and the mutual respect thing. You know, if that isn't there, then we really don't have a mandate to work. Yeah. So that would be my thought and my advice. So
stick with people that you can get along with and trust your gut.
And listen to your heart. Right. It's not so much listening to your gut, but listen to your heart. Do you feel comfortable with these folk?
Right, right.
And if you don't do it.
Okay, well, that sounds like very sensible advice. And I think we'll have to end on Michelle's question because we're coming very, very close to the end of our time. But one of the things I did want to ask you, in relation to, and I don't want this to sound like a sales pitch, but I'm interested in knowing, when you go into an organisation, you know, what's the process for you? If somebody watching this today was to say, actually, I quite liked some of the stuff he had to say, I'd like him to come in and do it, what could they expect?
Well, it's back to the comfortable in your skin. We have to get to know each other. I have to get to know what the question is, what you want out of my being invited in, and why that's important to you. And we have to get some basic information in place so that we can make a reasonable decision about what's to be done and how it's to be done. So it's, if you like, it's testing the waters.
Right.
Testing the waters. Do you feel comfortable with me? And this is true for any consultant, I think. You know, do you feel comfortable with this person from the outside? Are they going to add value? And I think if I can't add value, I won't do the work. And if they're not prepared to listen to what you have to say, then you're probably, as a consultant, not going to be getting along very far and being useful and adding value. So it's about mutual respect, it's about trust, building that up to start with a very small piece of work.
Right.
To test the waters and find out. And then we can see what's to be done. And remember, Zal Levy's 40 days, and not staying around too long. Invite the consultant in, very clear about what you want to achieve, and then ask them to leave.
I can see all these calendars being
absolutely.
So I suppose the bottom line there, in a nutshell, if someone's prepared to buy you a coffee and sort of a chat with you for an hour, that will give them a feel for whether or not it would work for them.
Absolutely.
And that advice goes for anybody.
I think so. Yeah. I think so. It's a bit like choosing your lawyer or your accountant or whatever. You know, it's do you feel comfortable with this person? Do they understand you and your conundrum? And do you think they can add value? And if the answer to any of the above is no, then don't do it.
Walk away.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's been really good. We've run out of time, so thanks again for coming along, Stephen. One of the things that you did say, however, and I'll just make this offer to people, Stephen's more than happy if anyone wants to drop him an email. We'll put his email address up at the end here. regardless of whether it's about wanting to use them at some point in the future. If it's just to ask a question, he'll be more than happy to exchange emails with you on any questions that you maybe didn't get the chance to ask today, or you did ask and you want to explore a little bit further. So we'll put that address up at the end of the webcast, and as I say, please feel free to get in touch with him at any stage. He'll do what he can to respond.
Will. Thank you.
It just remains for me to say thank you to everyone for tuning in today. We have a programme of new webcasts just about to be announced in the next couple of weeks. Unfortunately, I can't give you confirmed details of them at the moment, but if you're on our lists, you'll be hearing about them very, very soon, and we hope that you'll be able to join us for some of the webcasts that we'll be doing during May. I had to think about that. They're not April, we've got the Easter holidays in April, but in May we will have a series of webcasts running then, and we'll be letting you know more about that shortly. So thanks very much for logging in, and thanks for all your questions. Enjoy the rest of your day.